Okay, welcome back to part two of two for our discussion on administration and record keeping. Right now, we're going to discuss sources of capital. This is how agencies, cities fund their operations. So, there are four general sources of financing available to publicly owned utilities. One is taxes, right? So, obviously, we're all pretty familiar with that one. Revenues from sales of water, obviously. But then you have aid that can be given to you from state or federal government. And then there's bonds. This is kind of like borrowing money. Um, so, so taxes, there's a definition of it, but it's you know, essentially we all kind of familiar with taxes, right? You pay a lot of these, and it's what's used to fund, government operations. Revenues, and this could be anything like, in addition to taxes, at the city level or local government level, they do provide services, and then those services you have to pay for. So that's a sense of revenue there. However, they're all technically supposed to be like a nonprofit organization. So the money that they bring in needs to go back into the organization, especially like with a water agency. And that's why you find water agencies tend to do better when it comes to their finances, because the revenue from water billing is very consistent, and it goes right back into the agency. Um, but revenues are, there to cover your operation and maintenance costs. They pay for that interest on your bonds, um, and then also for capital expenditures. Contributions in aid. So, like I said, this is kind of a way to get money to fund projects. Typically, they are specific in how they're supposed to be spent. Um, So in this example here, like I've said, the anytime you have a new water service that is installed, there are what's called capacity fees or capacity charges that are included in the total cost of the construction of that water service. And that's what's used that's essentially how the water authority, for example, gets a lot of their money to fund their operations, is through these capacity charges. So here is an example of a fee sheet that the Vista Irrigation District uses. Anytime water service is being installed, depending on its size, will depend on its cost. If the district is performing the work, or if the contractor is performing the work, if you have um, fire hydrant installations, RPDA, fire service installations. There's a lot of, different costs that get included in or in addition to the construction costs. Sources of capital, like I said, bonds. These are issued for acquiring, constructing, replacing, or involved improving waterworks. Typically, bonds or service are paid for by the revenue or taxes. So basically, you take out a loan, um, and in this case, it's referred to as a bond, and you pay that back, through your revenue, right? Just like anyone else, right? But it's a way of funding your operations for like a large capital project. So it's important too that, when you're financing these sorts of things, that you make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where all you're doing is debt servicing, meaning you're just paying the interest. You really should be paying the interest and the principal when there is, a bond. Listed here are a few general accounting principles. So Each utility is responsible for maintaining an account for each facility, and it's important to maintain that in perpetuity, which means essentially forever. And you want to keep that information on a monthly basis. You should close it out just to show that, hey, was there any depreciation that accrued during the month prior? Um, and then each utility shall maintain separate records, like I said, for each utility that's owned and operated. And then each utilities shall maintain records of its facilities to reflect the actual cost of the facility. And this is all done during a fiscal year. And a fiscal year will run typically from July 1st through June 30th or January 1st through December 31st. So as you guessed, we're talking about accounting and financial management. There's going to be some math involved. Um, so bonding companies, when they have somebody who's issuing bonds, they're going to look to see what is your balance or what's your financial stability like, which should be at least a 1.0, but most bond companies are going to require you to have a 1.25 operating ratio. So meaning that your revenues are 1.25% of your operating expenses. And so how we calculate that out is we take the operating ratio, which will equal, your total revenues divided by operating expenses, and that's how you would come up with this number, um, like you have here in these examples. So here we have one problem, right? So what is the operating ratio of a utility whose total revenues are 1.8 million and its operating expenses are 1.45 million? So thinking back to the equation that I just showed you, operating ratio equals total revenues divided by total operating expenses. So you would just plug in these numbers into your equation. So you'd have 1.8 divided by 1.45, and you would get 1.24. Now, thinking back to what I said, most bond companies are going to require at least a 1.25. So in this case, it might be harder for you to get bonds issued to you because you fall below that 1.25. So here we've got coverage ratio, like I've been explaining here. It's the measurement indicating the ability of a utility to pay both the principal and the interest on its bonds debt service, right? So debt servicing, like I said before, is just paying the interest, but you need to be able to pay both the interest and the principal in this case, right? And so those bonding companies are usually going to want to see a 1.25% or higher, uh, you know, revenues versus debt. So to solve for coverage ratio, again, it's pretty similar to the last equation. It's just total revenues minus debt service divided by, or minus non-debt service divided by debt service. Um, I think we got a problem coming up here. Okay, so here's our problem, right? What is the coverage ratio of the previous utility if the debt service is $500,000? So we got to look at this and say, okay, our non-debt service, which is the total debt, minus the debt service, which is that interest, right? So that would be the 1.45 million that we talked about earlier. Subtract that $500,000, and you would get $950,000 of non-debt service, right? So now we've got our total revenues, which was that $1.8 million, and we're going to subtract $950,000 and then divide that by the $500,000. So let's plug that into our equation here. And so you wind up getting $850,000 divided by $500,000, and you get 1.7. So that is above the 1.25, which is, like I said, what bonding companies are looking for. So you're actually looking pretty good. So in order to do everything, obviously you got to budget your finances in order to be successful and stay out of the red. So you need to know how much you're spending on an annual basis, and that is used as a benchmark number to kind of figure out how much you need for each category. If you're spending a bunch of money on mainline replacement, if you're spending money on maintenance, are you spending money on, asphalt repairs or traffic control, right? You need to figure out how much is being spent everywhere. If you have a fleet, how much money is being spent to maintain that fleet annually? Even wages and benefits have to be taken into account, right? And so you need to also factor in increases. So obviously there's going to be inflation, so a cost of living adjustment, and most agencies when they negotiate contracts, they negotiate some sort of a or cost of living increase. So you need to take into consideration all of these increases that are going to happen on an annual basis. Most agencies will use like a 3% rule. And just to, when you're forecasting for, 5, 10 years out, you kind of estimate that there's going to be a 3% increase annually. And, you'll probably be above or below that throughout the years, but it's kind of a good general benchmark number to use. Um, so budgeting is vital to every organization. So in order to, do some cost analysis on some of your equipment to see, what it's going to cost you to operate a facility, I've got an example right here. So you have a pump that's been in operation for 25 years and operates at 600 gallons per minute with 47 feet of total dynamic head. The pump uses 6,071 kilowatts per hour or kilowatt hours per month at, 0.085 cents per kilowatt hour. If the pump efficiency is 63%, how long will it take to pay for a new pump rated at 86% that costs $9,730? It's a mouthful. There's a lot of information given to you here. However, you do need most of it. So first thing you want to do is figure out how much is the old pump costing per month. And to do that, you would take the old pump operating costs, which is given to you here, um, and then you want to take that cost, or you take, so you, I've given you the formula here, right? So now let's just plug in these numbers. We know that um, we've got a kilowatt hour per month of 6,071. And then we want to multiply that by the kilowatt hours, which was the 0.085 kilowatt per hour, right? And when you perform that calculation, you come up with a total operating cost per month of $516.04. So that's how you figure out like the first step in this problem, right? So now we know how much this one pump is costing us to operate per month. The next step is figuring out how much the new pump would cost to operate every month. So now we've got basically the same equation here. We've got our kilowatt per hour per month um, times the efficiency rate though in this one, the change in efficiency, because we knew that the previous pump was operating at a pump efficiency of 63%. However, the new pump's going to be at 86%. And then you want to multiply that by the cost per kilowatt hour, which is that constant figure of the 0.085 kilowatt per hour. So the new pump will be the same kilowatt per hour, but then you want to multiply 63% divided by 85%, and then multiply that by 0.085 kilowatt hours, and your new operating cost per month is $378.03 per month. So now you can see that we have that difference. We know now that and you could just subtract 378.03 from the 516.04. if you wanted to. But you could see that here. So that was the next step. You take the old operating cost minus the new cost times 12 months. That way we can figure out how much it is per year. So um, you wind up getting $138.01. Multiply that by 12, and you get $1,656.12 per year. And that's your annual savings. So if your pump costs that $9,730, now we need to figure out how long will it take for us to pay that pump off? So what's our return on investment? So we take the initial cost of that pump, divide it by the annual savings, and you get 5.9 years to get your ROI. Let's do another one. Why not? Pump has been in operation for 20 years and operates at 750 gallons per minute with 150 feet of total dynamic head. Pump uses 5,852 kilowatt hours per month at 0.089 cents per kilowatt hour. If pump efficiency is at 68%, how long will it take to pay for a new pump rated at 89% that costs $10,250? So take we do just like before, right? So old pump operating costs, calculate out the numbers there, and you wind up getting $520.83 per month. The new operating pump cost is, 68% divided by 89% times the kilowatt hours per month times the um, cost per kilowatt hour. You get $397.94 per month. So then we subtract the old operating cost, or subtract the new operating cost from the old operating cost, and then multiply that by 12 months. And our annual savings is $1,474.68 per year. So how long will it take to pay for the new pump? So like we did before, we're going to take the total cost of that new pump at $10,250 divided by $1,474.68, and you're left with 6.95 years to pay off that pump. All right, let's look at some production cost math. Assuming a wellhead facility is producing 5,000 gallons per minute and gaseous chlorine is fed with a demand of 0.5 milligrams per liter and a residual of 1.0 milligrams per liter, what is the monthly 30-day, right? When you're calculating out monthly, when it comes to chlorine dosage, it's always a 30-day calculation. What is the monthly chemical cost of chlorine gas at 350 dollars per ton? So we got to figure out, gallons per minute times 1440 per day. So we had that 5,000 gallons per minute times the minutes in a day. You get 7,200,000 gallons per day, or 7.2 mgd. And then for pounds of chlorine per day, we're going million gallons per day times 8.34 times your parts per million. But like I said before, you got to pay attention to the demand and the residual here. So our 7.2 times 8.34 times, and then that you want to add the two together, right? 1 plus 0.5, you get 1.5 milligrams per liter. You multiply all those together, you wind up getting 90.1 pounds per day. So now we've got our costs that we need to take into consideration here, because we're doing a problem on production cost. We got our pounds per day times days in a month times the cost per ton, and we know that a ton is 2,000 pounds. So punch in your numbers here. So 90.1 pounds per day times 30 days per month times $350 per ton divided by 2,000 pounds per ton. Your pounds will cancel out, your days will cancel out, your tons will cancel out. you're left with 304, excuse me, $473 per month for production costs. All right, let's do another one. This time we're going to deal with a well. Assuming a wellhead facility is producing 2,000 gallons per minute and gaseous chlorine is fed with a demand of zero point 0.8 milligrams per liter and a residual of 2.0 milligrams per liter. What is the monthly chemical cost of chlorine gas when that cost is $350 per ton? Again, you're going to plug and play, put in the numbers, calculate out your million gallons per day first, and then you want to punch in the other numbers for your your pounds formula. So 2.88 million gallons a day times 8.34 times 2.8 gets you 67.25 pounds of chlorine per day. So then plug that back into the next formula, which is pounds per day times days per month times cost per ton divided by 2,000 pounds per ton. And you're going to wind up getting $353.06 per month for the cost of chlorine gas. All right, moving on. You've got the total coliform rule, right? This is very important. It was established by the EPA in 1989, and it sets both the maximum contaminant level and the maximum contaminant level goal for total coliforms. Total coliforms are a group of related bacteria, with a few exceptions. And these total coliforms, bacteria is in everything, right? If anyone's ever eaten yogurt, I mean, you're just scooping bacteria into your mouth. But it's not all bacteria is harmful for you. However, it is used as a good indicator to let you know that, hey, there it might be something potentially in your water. So if you were to take a water sample and you put in what's called a colalert, which is it's a product that's used to promote bacterial growth, or coliform growth, right? So as you can see in the pictures here, if there's no bacteria in your water, it's going to stay clear. If it is positive for coliforms, it will turn like a yellow. However, if it's got E. coli, when you hold it under a black light, it's going to fluoresce. If it does turn positive for coliform and you hold it under that black light and it does not fluoresce, then that's an indication that there's just, coliform bacteria in your water, not necessarily E. coli, which is obviously a big, huge health concern. Um, so pathogens, there's a variety of bacteria or pathogens. You got bacteria, parasites, and viruses that could potentially cause health issues. So the EPA considers total coliforms as a useful indicator of other pathogens. So in your sampling every month, if more than 5% of those samples contain coliforms, the public water system must report this violation to the state and to the public. Now you've got the revised total coliform rule, right? Total coliform rule wasn't enough. They had to revise it, just as more information comes out, they become more aware of, um, I guess, the issues surrounding this, right? So you have the RTCR, which became effective in 2016, and it establishes the find and fix approach for investigating and correcting causes of coliform problems within water distribution systems. You got a nice little picture here of, how small E. coli is, and, surprisingly enough, it's very, very, it can be very deadly. You got a ton of requirements here. I don't expect you to, retain all of this stuff. But you should know that, at least where to start looking if you are dealing with a total coliform rule. Obviously in California, everything is much stricter. So, if you have an issue, please consult this chart. You can find it available for you at the State Water Resource Control Board, or you can look it up, California EPA. You should be able to look up, total coliform rule or revised total coliform rule, and get this information. So you have disinfectants and disinfection byproduct rule, right? So your DDPD rule. All right. So the purpose of this is obviously we treat our water, right? But when you disinfect water, you have a disinfection byproduct that is created. All right. So obviously the purpose of disinfection is to kill or inactivate any disease-causing microorganisms that cause serious health and injury or death. But in doing so, you are going to have this disinfection byproduct. So disinfectants can react naturally occurring materials, NOM, in the water to form unintended disinfection byproducts. So you could have, if you're treating with coliforms or you're treating with UV or, not UV, like gaseous chlorine, you're going to create some sort of a byproduct. So the way the rule lays out, it lays out this maximum residual disinfectant levels, right? So your chlorine, for example, right? You can you can only have a residual in your system of a maximum residual in your system of 4.0 parts per million. However, you do need to maintain chlorine in your system as well, and that has to be at zero point 0.2 milligrams per liter throughout your system at a minimum, right? So, disinfection byproducts that are created through chlorine are uh, trihalomethanes or haloacidic acids, and that's that TTHM and HAA5. Um, so the monitoring is the same time, same location as a TCR sample, a total coliform oral sample. So you need to routinely sample for these things on a consistent basis. Lead and copper rule continued here, or excuse me, the lead and copper rule, right? It was established by the EPA to protect public health and reduce exposure to lead in drinking water. The way you sample for it, you sample it at the customer tap. I've had to go through several rounds of this, and so long as your system looks pretty good and uh, you know, you're not, everything is acceptable up to the 90th percentile. Your sampling frequency is typically every 3 years for the lead and copper rule. However, if there's violations on it, the EPA can increase your frequency of testing. So the way the testing works is that you provide, first you got to reach out to your customers and ask them if they're willing to participate in the sampling. Then you provide them with a sampling container, and they have to actually grab this sample from you or for you because it's done from their tap. Now they can't just go and grab this sample for you as you hand them the bottle. They actually have to wait and keep everything in their system and in their water in their own private system still for a period of around 6 to 9 hours, and then they can grab a sample, right? So obviously the goal of this would be zero. But the goal in a lot of cases is unrealistic. So that's why they've established MCLs or an action level, if you will. So the action level for lead is 15 parts per billion, or for copper, it's 1.3 parts per billion. Um, so anything that exceeds the action level is not a violation unless a system does not perform certain actions, i.e. public education, lead service line replacement, right? Um, I can't think of any lead service lines in our system that I'm aware of. Everything's either going to be Orangeburg, which is like a plastic, or they're copper. Um, but I've never come across a lead service line. I've seen galvanized piping on private systems, but never really come across a lead service lateral or private system. So record keeping requirements, obviously that's a big one. You want to keep records, right? You want to, be able to tell this story, of what happened, later on in the future for a lot of different reasons, right? But most importantly, if you're pulled into litigation, you want to be able to defend yourself. Um, so there's different types of system information and additional records that you will keep. Uh, how long you retain it is usually set by your public water system, right? Your rules and regs are typically where you can find this information. Um, but you should recognize that there's benefits of keeping these things. Like I said, if you find yourself in court, you want to be able to pull this stuff out. I can't tell you, like, I've been deposed a few different times where I responded to an incident. However, that deposition didn't take place right away. It was nearly 10 years later when they were bringing me in for, to ask me questions about what happened when I responded. So having detailed records is very important, and then maintaining those records. So, kind of wrapping things up here, getting close to the end, what records are you required to keep? Well, here I've got this form here, which I found online, through the state, but it kind of outlines, the how long you're supposed to maintain records and what records are maintained for how long, right? Um, so like any actions that were taken by, the system or corrective actions that were taken. Uh, you know, Based on this, you're supposed to keep it for 3 years. Next, you've got microbiological or you've got chemical analysis, right? You can see that those are 5 and 10 years. Um, if you're a public water system, you got to maintain any kind of notifications that you might have done for the next 3 years, right? So it varies. It just depends on what it is you guys are doing, or what took place, and that will dictate how long you have to maintain those records for. Some additional records you might want to keep, any kind of information on system infrastructure. And this is one of those that's kept in perpetuity. You're keeping something like that forever, right? Any kind of maintenance records, as-built, easement documents, you definitely want to maintain that stuff forever. Any kind of equipment purchases or records of repair, like I said, operations, maintenance logs, any kind of, service records that you may have. You maintain all of that stuff. Operator certifications, you don't need to hang on to those forever. Financial information, you're likely going to hang on to that in perpetuity. Customer complaints, definitely want to keep stuff on that. So there's a whole bunch of reasons and other records that you'd want to maintain, for various reasons and for various frequencies. So, like I said, the benefits of record keeping, obviously, records are simple, easy, and cost-effective way of managing, right? So, like what we've talked about in the past, budgeting, figuring out how long it would take to get a return on an investment. If you have customer complaints, water quality issues, it's like easy to pull that stuff up and find out, what took place. Accurate records. That's definitely something that I tend to get on my guys about is providing a lot of detail that leaves me with no questions about the actions that they took. We've, I can, I won't go into detail, but recently we had to go to litigation over a customer who said that, we broke his private line. And unfortunately, our records were not very solid, and the judge who was overseeing the case, I don't think had a very good understanding of water distribution systems or, maintenance in general. And so he wound up siding with the customer in this case. But I think it was just due to a level of ignorance on his part. We had an expert witness on site, somebody who could speak to, the actions that were taken, but it didn't seem to help. So anyway, that's why it's important to maintain very good, accurate information that, a layman person who maybe doesn't do your job, if somebody was to just come in and read the steps that you took, they could understand the situation, right? So yeah, a lot of benefits to maintaining very good records. Lastly, you want to make sure that you keep these things secure. You don't want a lot of people to have access to it, especially, hackers, right? You don't want them getting to this information. Obviously, it'll be used against you. They can, hold things up for ransom, whatever it may be, right? So you definitely want to limit access, and the means that are used, obviously, it just varies. If you're keeping things electronically, having several firewalls, if you're keeping this information as a hard copy inside of a vault, you want to have it locked, have a code, maybe put cameras in there to, show who was in the vault. So maintaining secure records is just as important as maintaining the records themselves. Um, and with that, if you made it this far and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I know this was a really dry subject this week, not something that we all really sign up for, but again, it's important. All right, have a good week. Bye.